Welcome to the Stepmom Side with Alicia, the podcast for stepmoms ready to create the life they want and one they actually have a say in. Here we talk all things stepmom life and just a little bit more. Leave the superficial conversations at the door and get ready for perspective shifts and actionable advice to help you on your way to creating the life you want, one step at a time.
Hello and welcome back to the Stepmom Side podcast. This is not actually a podcast topic that I had planned to speak about, but from my first episode at the end, you might remember that I had talked about being just the stepmom and how you could reframe that. And I got feedback on how do I get to that point? How do I get to where I can reframe it from being just the stepmom to I'm just the stepmom? Do you hear the difference in that? You get, like, society will tell you, you're just the stepmom. Basically, like, shut up and mind your business, or like stay in your lane, or love the kids like they're your own, but don't overstep because you're not their mom. Just don't forget that. To going to the part where I'm just the stepmom and I'm not really the one that's in charge, and I'm actually okay with that. So let's chat about this. And what I want you to do is I want you to just like follow along and tell me if you relate or if you're like, whoa, Alicia, you're way out there. Like, this is a little bit crazy. But I want to know, like, your thoughts on this. So like I said, if you're in your early years as a stepmom and you're struggling with the societal pressure of doing all the things, showing up in all the ways, making everything awesome, and like basically like driving yourself into the ground or driving yourself mad, and you're struggling with it, but like you don't know what to do, but you feel like you have to do everything because you're a stepmom now, and now these are your kids, and you have to show up in all of the ways, but you want to get off that hamster wheel of like doing all of the things. Like, just listen to this. So I'm sure that when you signed up to be a stepmom, you probably, obviously, had no idea what you were signing up for. I sure didn't, and there were things that, like, had I known, like, maybe I would have listened to my friends that were like, oh, I would never date a man with kids. And I was like, but I love him. And then now I'm like, oh, yeah, I didn't sign up for any of this. But if you find yourself caught in that role of trying to do all of the things, let me ask you this. Wait, before I ask you anything, let me preface it with, this is not coming from a place of judgment. I don't want to shame you. Again, absolutely no judgment, because I've been in this place. Like, if you would have asked me this question 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I would have been pissed. But just stepmom to stepmom, if you were at my house and we were hanging out, I would probably ask you this question if you were struggling in your early years with doing all the things. So my question is this: are you doing all of these things because you want to? So that's A. Or are you doing all of these things, B, because you feel like you need to keep up with society's view of being a stepmom, and that's like showing up? Like, which is it? Is it A or is it B? If it's A, that's awesome. Like, I love that you want to do it. But if it's B, you're doing it because you feel like you have to. Let me just remind you, before you showed up on this scene, your partner was doing all of the things that you were doing. Now, granted, it might not have been at the level that you were doing them at. Like, the house might not have been as clean as you had it. The kids might not have been as eating as well as you think that they should have, or whatever the case may be. Bottom line is, whatever it was done, or whatever was getting done was getting done. And then you show up, and again, no judgment, because I did this too. Like, I'm so good at running my life. You're like, here, let me run yours. And like nervous laughter, because it's true, but it's also not like a healthy mindset. And if you feel like you're at that point where you have to keep up with societal pressures, you're not going to be doing all of the things because you want to. You're doing all of them, obviously, because you feel like you have to keep up with societal pressures. But then you start to get to a point where you're pissed about it. And, you know, at first, maybe it's like, I can do this. I'm going to take on all of these things, and I'm going to rock it, and I'm going to be amazing at it. And that's what I did. I was like, this is awesome. This is a competition, and I'm going to win this competition because I'm pretty damn competitive, and I'm going to be awesome, and you're not going to know that I'm struggling until like you do, and it's going to come out in like all of the ways, and I'm not really good at hiding my emotions, and I'm not really good at hiding my frustration. And so then I was really resentful of a lot of things, and I was in a really bad place. And I was sabotaging everything. I was sabotaging my relationship with my husband. I was sabotaging my relationship with my stepkids, with everyone, my relationship with myself. But then I started to realize I had decided to take those on my own, like whatever it was that I was doing. And so I had a conversation with my husband about it. A conversation, it's a funny word to use right there, because it wasn't a conversation. It was basically like him drinking out of a fire hydrant and me just blasting whatever I thought. And at the end of me exploding, he was like, Alicia, I didn't ask you to do any of these things. You took them on yourself because you thought that you were better at them. Now, mind you, you are, but I didn't ask you to do them. You did them. And I wasn't going to fight you on it, because I know you well enough to know that that's not going to go well either. And I was pissed, like, to be honest with you. It was like, it's not, he doesn't even appreciate what I'm doing. He doesn't appreciate all of the things that I've done. And I'm going to be honest and tell you, it's not that he appreciated or didn't appreciate what I was doing. It's that I was doing it looking for that outside validation of, you're a great wife, you're a great stepmom, like, wow, look at you, you can do all of these things. And that's like ass backwards. Like, that's not what you should be doing. Or that's not what I should have been doing. I'm not going to say you, because maybe that's like your thing. But like, for me, I was like, I don't even like this. Like, who the hell am I to be looking for outside validation? Like, that's never been my thing. And so then I decided to not do all of the things. And, I disengaged, but I did it the wrong way. I did it out of spite, because you don't know what you don't know, right? So when I decided to disengage and to not do any of the things anymore, like I said, I did it out of spite. So it was like, oh yeah, you don't appreciate me? Watch this. I'm not going to do anything. And I struggled with that, because nothing was done the way that I wanted it to be done. Nothing was up to my expectations. Nothing was up to my standards. And it was really, like I said, like, it's really hard for me to hide my emotions. It's really hard for me to hide my frustration. It's really hard for me to not show what I'm not saying, what I'm not saying on my face. And that caused turmoil in my marriage too. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, I didn't sign up for any of this either. So then it got to the point where I was like, okay, if I'm going to decide to not do all of these things, I need to be okay with it. And that's easier said than done. But it took me, just to be realistic with you, it took me, I don't know, like 2 years, like YEARS, years, to get to the point of, okay, deep breaths, like, everything is going to be okay if it's not clean to my standards. So just to give you, this is so embarrassing to say, but just to give you an idea of like my cleaning standards, growing up, if we were ever with my grandma and she had us vacuum, like, to clean up after ourselves, like, the lines had to be perfect on the floor, or we would do the whole floor all over again. So when I would vacuum, that's how I would vacuum. Like, that's how I was taught how to vacuum. So that's how I would vacuum. And one time my husband was joking with me about it. I was like, look how awesome this looks. I mean, it does feel good because it looks like perfect. But he was like, that's great that you can vacuum so great. But is this like a security thing too? Like, if somebody walks on it, like, that somebody was here, which kind of made me laugh because I'd never thought of it like that. But so that's how I vacuumed. But I also expected him to vacuum like that. I expected my stepkids to vacuum like that. And so obviously the three of them did not vacuum like that, which my daughter is 4 and she just vacuumed yesterday for the first time ever because she wanted to help me. And I was like, okay, well, here you go. Good luck. And she doesn't even remotely doesn't even come close to like vacuuming in a straight line. It's like all over the rug. And I was like, whatever. I don't even care. So it's just like letting that stuff go and being okay with things getting done, not necessarily to your standard. And so I had to change my mindset of, okay, it's done. It's one less thing that I have to do, but I have to not sit there and critique it and nitpick the hell out of whatever somebody did. I asked them to do that. I'm handing off that task. I'm delegating it. I need to delegate it and let it go. And you can go back and say, hey, you know what? Thank you so much for doing the dishes. just to make sure that they dry properly. Can you stand them up? However, but thank you so much for doing them. I learned this from my husband, to like sandwich whatever critique you've got in between two compliments. Like, hey, thank you so much for doing this. It looks really nice. Here's the critique. Here's a follow-up compliment. Like, it's delivered and received a lot better. Something I was definitely not good at in my early years. So it took a long time to get to that point of just letting things go. Like I said, it took about 2 years to fully like let that go. So if you're struggling with doing all of the things and not feeling appreciated and being told that you're just the stepmom, I just want you to know it's a shitty place to be in. Like, it's hard to be doing all of the things and still being told like you're just the stepmom. Or if you're a full-time stepmom and you are doing literally everything that a mom should be doing, but you're also told like you're just the stepmom and you shouldn't be going to meetings, or whether it's like parent-teacher meetings or doctor's appointments or paying for the things. That's a weird like conundrum to be in, because it's almost like a warped sense of reality. Like, I'm doing all of the things, but I'm not supposed to be doing all the things, but I am doing all of the things because you're not doing all of the things. So it's like this weird, like, competition's not necessarily the right word, because it's not a competition, because at the end of the day, this is something else that might ruffle feathers. The kid or the kid's mom is still their mom, no matter what happens, right? It doesn't matter if the parents get divorced. It doesn't matter if she remarries. It doesn't matter if, God forbid, she passes away. Their mom is still their mom. And as much as you want to say, that's my kid, because I know some stepmoms do, like, that's my son, that's my daughter. Literally, legally, physically, all of the things, at the end of the day, that is not your kid. And it took me a while to get to that point, because I felt like if I said, and granted, just full disclosure, I've never gone and presented my stepkids to anyone that we know as my kid. Like, this is my son or my daughter, anything like that. If I see a stranger on the street and I'm never going to see them again, I will just say it's my son or my daughter, depending on the day. But then I don't have to explain it because I'm never going to see them again. But in real life, I don't ever just tell people like, this is my son or my daughter, because at some point they're going to find out, and then that's going to be awkward. Well, like, this really isn't your kid, but I've believed for however many years that it was. And I feel like it's a little disrespectful to their mom to try to claim somebody else's kid. Like, that's just my personal opinion. But when you can get to the point of, I don't have to love my stepkids like my own kid. I don't have to show up for them like my own kid. I don't have to do all of the things like I do for my own kid. It's so freeing. And if you are a stepmom that doesn't have kids or doesn't want kids, or maybe you do want kids, but at this point, for whatever reason, let's pretend in a hypothetical situation that you're a stepmom that doesn't have kids and you've never had a kid of your own. It's hard to love a kid like your own if you don't actually know what that's like. Like, I was like, I don't understand how different this is going to be. Like, I'm crazy about my stepkids. Like, how could I possibly love like my own kid more than I love them? Because I, hadn't loved somebody else's kids like that. And then when I did have my daughter, I was like, oh, it is different. Not bad. It's just different because it's different. And here's how I would explain it to you. The way that you love your brother or your sister or your cousin or your niece is different than how you love your parents, which is different than how you love your spouse, which is different than how you love your friends, which is different than how your relationship is with a coworker or whatever. That's what I would say. It's not necessarily different bad. It's just different. And that's okay. I think that's where people, specifically stepmoms, get caught in this circling the drain of like, okay, it's different, so that means that it's bad. It's not different because it's bad. It's different just because it's different. And it can be different in a good way. And yeah, just please, please, please try to get out of the spiral of feeling like you have to love your stepkids like your own, especially if you're in a situation where you're like, I don't even like them. how am I supposed to love them? But I'm being told by everyone under the sun that I need to love them like my own. Again, it goes back to like that societal pressure, and it mounts and it mounts and it mounts and it mounts, and it leads to you as a stepmom feeling like, I'm never going to be enough. I'm never going to be doing it the right way. Our relationship's never going to be great. And so you just spiral and you just circle, and then you're in your head about it and you can't get out of your head about it. And, you know, a lot of us, me included, went to my husband, boyfriend, fiance at the time, and tried talking to him about it. But he's too close to the situation. He's emotionally invested. I'm emotionally invested, but he's way more emotionally invested and can't give me the advice that I need. But then I always say, unless you're a stepmom, you don't get it. You don't get it. So back to like my main point, to come back from that tangent a bit. How do you get to the point where you're like, I'm just the stepmom, as opposed to being like, I'm just the stepmom, like I don't have any control over this? You can like own it and step into that. You know what? Yeah, I am just the stepmom. And that's a great question. Like I said, it took years for me to get to that point. But what I had to realize was I needed to stop trying to be something that I wanted. I struggled because I wanted a kid of my own. Son, daughter didn't matter, but I wanted a kid of my own. And so it was kind of like having my stepkids around was like pouring salt into a fresh wound. And I struggled with that silently for a really long time. And then once it came out, like I couldn't take it back, but a lot of it made sense. I thought that I was never one of those girls growing up that was like, oh, I can't wait until I get married. And, I'm going to get married on this day. I'm going to have this many kids and all of those things. That was never my thing. I was more career driven. And if I got married, I got married. If I had kids, I had kids. And then I think that, just being around my stepkids, I was like, no, I definitely want my own kid for a multitude of reasons. Like, one, I just want my own kid to like have fun with and like be able to actually have a relationship with. That's not, dictated by outside forces or outside factors rather, but something or someone that is actually mine. And once I was honest with myself, then I could be like, okay, I'm trying to like fill this void with my stepkids and it's not working. And then I had to realize it's not working because they already have a mom. They don't need me to be their mom. I don't need to be their mom. Why am I so caught up trying to be their mom? Why don't I just be like the fun aunt, or like the role that I have more so taken on is more like a mentor or just an older friend that happens to be around all of the time, like good or bad. But once I took the pressure off of myself to just show up in a way that felt good to me, again, I just wanted to show up in a way that felt good to me. So if you're multitasking, come back to me. Or if your brain is off wherever it is, like mine is sometimes, come back to me. I want you to show up for your stepkids in a way that feels good for you. I don't want you to show up for them in the way that society thinks you should, in the way that your partner thinks that you should, or a way that your extended family thinks that you should. Because at the end of the day, you can only show up how you show up. So just like their dad is their dad, their mom is their mom, their grandma is their grandma, their uncle is their uncle, their grandfather is their grandfather, their, aunt is their aunt, like whatever the case may be. You are the only one that gets to be the stepmom. Their mom can't be the stepmom. Their dad can't be the stepmom. Their friends' mom can't be the stepmom. You are the only one that gets to be the stepmom. And rather than competing with, I'm going to try to be the mom, just be you. I know that sounds so cliche, like just be you, everyone else is taken. But seriously, if you step back, you can be like, oh, I'm the only one that can be this stepmom. I'm the only one that has this role. what do I want that to look like? How do I want to show up for that? And, back to, not showing up how everyone else thinks that you should show up, because you're the only one that can show up as you. So whatever and however you're showing up, that's however you're going to show up forever, for the rest of your life. So don't get caught up in showing up the way that somebody else thinks that you should, because you might not be able to constantly or consistently meet that expectation. So just be you. And it might feel weird. It might feel like off-putting or awkward, because now you're not going to be this over-the-top person, or maybe now you are going to be this over-the-top person that shows up in everything, every single thing. But just show up how you want to show up. And if that means stepping back, step back. If that means stepping in and stepping up, step in and step up. But please remember, when your stepkid or stepkids grow up, they will look back on their childhood with an adult perspective. And I'm not saying that to scare you or, again, to shame you, because there's things that I've done that I shouldn't have done, or things that I said that I shouldn't have said, or ways that I've acted that I shouldn't have acted. But the kids are going to remember that, because there's things that they've said and done, there's things that there's ways that they've acted that maybe I didn't agree with, but I still remember them too. So everyone, this isn't a shame or a judgment thing. It's everyone does and says things that they shouldn't do or say at some point or another, right? And they will, once they're adults, be able to decide whether or not they want to have a relationship with you or your house or the other house and those parents. And so it really kind of puts things into perspective, because you hear, oh, you've only got 18 years with them, or oh, you've only got 18 summers or 18 Christmases, or whatever the case may be. You'll actually have a hell of a lot more if you guys have a really good relationship. So to get to the point of being just the stepmom, to get back to that point, once you can kind of step back and just show up in a way that feels good to you, it takes a lot of pressure off. And you're not constantly like, okay, well, what does my partner think of what I'm doing? What does the other house think of what I'm doing? What does the extended family think of what I'm doing? What does my family think of what I'm doing? Once you get to the point where you're like, I don't care what everyone else thinks. I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. I'm going to show up how I want to show up. And if that's not good enough for everyone else, the hell with them. You kind of have to get to that point where you're just like, I don't care anymore. And I think that's the snapping point for most people. That was the snapping point for me, or like the game-changing part for me. And for stepmoms that I've coached, that's usually where they get, or what happens when they get to that part. They're just like, I'm so frustrated with all of these things. And then it's just like, snap, the next coaching session, they're like, I'm out. The hell with what everyone else thinks. I'm doing X, Y, and Z. Like, I'm finally going to start implementing what you said, blah, 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 blah. That's great. I don't know why it takes us getting to that point to like finally just be like, F it. Like, I'm doing this and I'm kicking ass and I'm taking names, like whatever. I don't even care. Be pissed. I'm burning bridges, like whatever. It's almost like, this kind of makes me laugh because it is so true. It's almost like, as the person that is in charge, or as the grown up, you ask nicely, hey, can you put your dishes away? Hey, can you put your clothes away? Hey, can you pick up your toys? All of the things. And no one hears you or no one listens until you're like, I asked you to do this 8 million times. And then once you flip out, then it's like, well, why do you have to yell at us? I don't know, because I only asked you so many times nicely, and then now I'm flipping out, and then now that's like when you're listening. So kind of the same thing, like when you snap and people are like, oh, you used to be so much nicer. Yeah, I was nicer. And what that got me was taken advantage of. What that got me was being a big people pleaser. What that got me was nothing that I wanted. It got me what everyone else wanted, but at the end of the day, I was still frustrated with the things that I wanted that I wasn't getting. So yeah, as a recap, I would start showing up how you want to show up. I would care less about other people's opinions. And if you're struggling with other people's opinions, send me a message on DM. Like, let's have a conversation about it. And if you want to connect with other stepmoms that are going or have gone through this exact same thing, the Stepmom Side community is where you can find other stepmoms that have gone through this thing, or like I said, they're going through it right now. And I'm in there responding to, here's what I'm going through. How do I get through it? Or what are different tips and strategies or mindset perspective shifts to get me to this place? But if you're just like throwing spaghetti against a wall and hoping that it's going to stick, I'll be honest with you, because that's how I roll. It's probably not going to stick, or it might stick for a while, but then it's just going to fall off, because if you don't have a goal in mind, you kind of just flounder around. If you're like, okay, I want to get to the point where I show up for myself. Okay, let's get nitty-gritty about that. Like, what does it look like? So this would be your homework assignment. If you want to get to the point where you can be just the stepmom, like I'm just the stepmom. Like I don't really have a say in what the kids say or do. Like and I don't mean that like literally. I'm just like taking the pressure off of yourself. I feel like I have to put like a disclaimer here. Like I don't mean like just the stepmom, like you're this evil woman that doesn't care about the kids. I mean, you just can take deep breaths and you're not so caught up in everything and you're trying to be controlling or super type A. I mean, speaking from experience here, and I think a lot of stepmoms do that too. If you have a goal in mind, like, and you're like, okay, I want to be able to just be like, I'm just the stepmom. I'm letting the water roll off of my back. I'm just going to hang out. Okay, what is that? I hear you when you say that's what you want to be. What does that look like? Let's get granular. What does that look like? If you want to be a lot more laid back, you want to be just the stepmom, okay, what does that look like? Does it mean that you're not getting upset when the kids don't clean up the way that you think that they should, or things aren't done to your expectation? Does that mean that you are scheduling things for yourself? Does that mean that you are taking time to meet with your friends? Like, what does that look like? And how often are you doing these things? Like if it comes to like scheduling things for yourself, like what does that look like? Again, if you've got a goal, that's great, but let's break it down into actionable steps. And if you're on a coaching call, or if you've ever been on a coaching call with me, you know this is exactly what I do. Like, okay, great. This is the goal. How do we get there? How do we break it down? And that's how the progress is made. And that's how eventually you get to the point of becoming the woman that says, you know what, I'm just the stepmom. And rather than having it used against you, like you're just the stepmom, you get to say, I'm just a stepmom. There is something empowering. There is something relieving. There is something, I don't know, something that just feels good about being able to like take that pressure off of yourself and just say, I'm just the stepmom. I don't have to do it all. You know, the kids have you, but they've also got their parents. They've also got extended family. They've got their friends. You know, they've got so many people to help. They're not relying just on you. If you're a stepmom, that's a full-time stepmom. I've got you. I see you. We'll talk about being a full-time stepmom because I was one as well in a future podcast. But yeah, I want you to get to the point in your stepmom journey where you're like, I can do this. I'm not alone. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. So if you've enjoyed this episode, if you've got any like takeaways that you're like, dang, you know what, I needed to hear this, or if you're one of the stepmoms that reached out to me about, can you talk more about being just the stepmom? Shoot me a DM, like let me know how it's going, like what you thought, and I will chat with you next week.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this week's episode. If anything was helpful or resonated with you, please share it on social media and tag me. I'm just at Alicia Crosco. And if you could leave a 5-star rating and a review while you're at it, that would also be really helpful. And if you find yourself struggling with your stepmom journey and you want a little bit more support without the hefty price tag of coaching, you might want to check out the Stepmom Side community, which is my own private community for stepmoms, where you get to connect with other stepmoms around the world and myself, where I hold weekly office hours and monthly group coaching. It's kind of like you have your own personal coach in your own back pocket. Again, without that hefty price tag. See you next week.